Welcome to the Health Revolution, and today I'm very pleased that we have on Skype from America Mr. Ken Rohla, and Ken is going to talk to us about a number of very, very interesting subjects, including the remarkable things one can do with water and a number of other subjects. But first off, I'd like to introduce Ken. Are you there, Ken?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. I'd like to talk to you first, if I may, about your extraordinary dealings with the Martin Luther King family and exactly what happened. Perhaps you could enlighten us.
Okay. Gosh, for me, I guess the story started in 2005. It really started years before that. I had, probably back in the late 90s, I had read an article in a magazine called Media Bypass, which was an alternative news, like an uncensored news magazine that was published by a man named Ted Gunderson, who was the head of the FBI's office in Los Angeles. And apparently, Mr. Gunderson had a lot of dirt on a lot of different topics, a lot of details that weren't commonly known. So he published this magazine, and I recalled reading an article about the supposedly true story of the Martin Luther King assassination. And in this article, it went into the details of who assassinated him and why. And it was written by one of the gunmen, supposedly. And so I read that article and I thought, wow, this is interesting. I wonder if it's true. And then fast forward to 2005, I was actually taking a course at a natural health center in Florida here. And when I got done, it was a 9-week course, and I had shut my business down to take that course. So when I got back home, a few days later, the health center called me and they said, we have a VIP that needs your help. Would you be able to work with her? And I said, well, who is it? And they said, Coretta Scott King, Martin Luther King's wife. I was like, absolutely, I'll help her. And so ultimately, she was, when I found out, she was at this health center and she had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and she'd also had a stroke and she couldn't speak, but she was still very cogent. And so in the course of interviewing with the family, one of the things that I explained to them was that I had heard this story about the assassination. And also, when I work with people, these days I don't have time to do individual consults. I haven't done consults for about a year now. But when I was doing consults, one of the things I learned was that all physical health, or the lack thereof, starts in the mind and the emotions first. And so whenever you see a particular health issue, it is a reflection of something that's going on in the mind and the emotions. And it's usually, it indicates what type of emotional issues were going on. And so in the case of ovarian cancer, I realized that it had to do with children and family, and cancer is also a disease of anger. And so I was just explaining these things to the family as I was being interviewed, and apparently they knew things that I didn't. And so it really opened their eyes up, and they wound up hiring me, and I wound up living with Coretta King for 2 weeks and working with her, helping her with her health issues, and got to know the King family quite well in that short time, and got to have discussions with them about what really happened in the assassination. And so because I had been exposed to this information, they were just really, really surprised that I had even heard that, because they had been through, of course, the whole event, including a trial that was held to expose who was really behind the assassination. And it was actually something that most Americans, and others don't know, that there was actually a civil trial when the King family and James Earl Ray's lawyer could not get the U.S. government to open up a criminal trial, even though there was abundant evidence to do so. After many years of the King family and Ray's attorneys trying to get a trial opened to no avail, they decided to have a civil trial and to determine in civil court what had happened. And so they did that, and the trial was actually aired on television in the United States and in the UK one time back when it happened. This would have been in the late 90s. And they proved in court who had killed King and why. And essentially, it was a combination of the U.S. government and mafia types, and I believe the FBI and CIA were involved in it because, as it turns out, Martin Luther King was intending to run as Bobby Kennedy's vice presidential running mate in 1968, and he was also planning on doing a million-man march, what he called a Poor People's March, walking across the United States, collecting poor people for months, and then marching on Washington with 1 million poor people to hopefully end poverty and get some equality for poor people. And according to what was exposed in this article and also in discussing this with King family and others, the U.S. government was actually afraid that Martin Luther King could overthrow the government in that process. And so they assassinated him. And like I say, it was shown in court. You can actually see the trial transcripts. If you Google Martin Luther King trial transcripts, you can see the word-by-word account of it in the trial transcripts. And some alternative media has recently gotten a hold of it and published it. For example, InfoWars in the United States has published a really good article about it with the trial transcript. So you can actually see what the King family and what all the evidence was, what they said about the trial, and what the real motivations were. It was quite interesting. Also, the gunman that actually fired the trigger, that pulled the trigger, he actually admitted on UK television once that he was the assassin, but then he recanted. So it's quite an interesting story, and I got to see a lot of things working with the King family that were really amazing. They were very wonderful people. They were very egalitarian. They are what we hoped that they would be. They were very down to earth and unpretentious, and they were very kind and loving. They had been through a lot of trauma, of course, because their home had been bombed, and a lot of the world had hated them for years, and so they'd been through a lot. But they were, despite all of that, I was just astounded at how kind and loving they were, despite what they had been through. So that was quite an interesting experience. And being working so closely with Coretta, I got to meet a lot of civil rights leaders and politicians and celebrities, and go places with the King family and with them personally. And so it was just a really mind-blowing experience that I'll have to write a book about one day.
I noticed that the American government, the FBI and the CIA didn't end up behind bars as a result of the court case. Did anybody sort of get caught, so to speak, for real?
Well, because it was a civil trial and not a criminal trial, the King family won their case, and the only compensation that they asked for was $1, because the goal of the trial, of course, wasn't to punish anybody or to make any money off of it, and they didn't want to be accused of that. So they had a settlement for $1, and of course, yeah, nobody went to jail, nobody got indicted, nobody got anything, despite the fact that, like I say, it was televised one time. The American press, which is heavily controlled, of course, completely dismissed it, and I saw some articles from the day where they were saying that it was a sad attempt by the King family to justify their father's death and all sorts of cruel things. I've even seen for example, a female editor, an African-American female editor of the Atlanta Constitution newspaper, telling outright lies about the King family in her editorials when, she wouldn't even have her job most likely if it wasn't for them. And so a lot of people will sell out and be shills, and ultimately, it's kind of like Richard Pryor said, the justice system means it's just us. Meaning it's just us average people that go to jail. It seems like not a lot of these high-level politicians and assassins.
Well, not yet, anyway. So
exactly.
The next question, I didn't really mean that. The next question I'd like to ask you is about water, because I think as we are made of water, it's extremely important what we think about it, the source of the water. And I know you've done a lot of research to try and determine what real water is and how we find it and what we do to it. Perhaps you could tell us.
Right. I'm very results oriented. It's like I go and study all of these pie in the sky concepts and things, but in the end, I test them and see what really works and what really has an impact on our bodies and our health. And so, I can talk at great length about the physics of water, but in the end, it's like, what can you really do with this in your home and in your kitchen? But water, there's much, much more to water than just chemistry. And I had a conversation just a couple of days ago with a water purification company here in town that has 30 years experience, and they just couldn't see past the chemistry that they were taught in school. But water molecules are very, very unusual. They have a lot of unusual properties. They expand when they freeze. They can be affected by fields. They can be affected by consciousness. Do this dance. Groups of 6 of them hang on to each other, and they kind of do this square dance where they will hold on to 6 and then they'll let go and group up with another 6, and they're constantly doing that. And that's why water is able to be a liquid, because these bonds are not hard locked bonds like in mineral crystals. But when you expose water to fields of any kind, when you expose them to materials or pressure or heat or filtration, chemicals, all those things affect the clustering of those molecule groupings. And those clusterings create a pattern that, when ingested in the body, convey information to the body, and it will either trigger a healing response or disease response, depending on what the water's been exposed to. And that is the whole basis of homeopathy. So water clustering is a very important subject to understand, and people who deal with water purification typically don't have any idea that that is even in existence. And so ideally, we want to expose water to natural energies like sunlight and cosmic radiation and frequencies of sound that occur in the ground and in nature that will program it and make it structure so that it has at least a benevolent effect or a neutral effect, if not a healing effect. What's been discovered is you can do things with water that can make it extremely healing and regenerative. And one of these is by bringing out minerals in the water that are kind of stealth minerals that are hiding in the water that do not show up in analysis. Normally, in waters, when you talk about minerals, scientists know you've got organic and inorganic minerals dissolved in water, depending on the source of the water. And ideally, you want organic minerals that have particle sizes of just a few atoms each, so that when you ingest the water, the minerals can be metabolized and they can get into cells and feed them and build the structures in the body that minerals create. But water can have too many minerals that are inorganic and insoluble, and the body can't absorb them. And so you've got to, when you're dealing with water purification, you've got to, first of all, either make the minerals bioavailable or remove some of them and make what remains bioavailable. And so one of the ways you can do that is by vortexing water in magnetic fields and in scalar fields. Scalar fields being a faster than light type of subtle energy. So, and also within these natural waters, particularly groundwater and ocean water and spring water, there are monoatomic minerals, which simply means minerals that can exist as individual discrete atoms, not bundled together with other atoms, which supposedly in nature cannot occur, but in fact it does. And those are known as monoatomic minerals or ormus minerals. And those minerals, when ingested, are extremely healing and regenerative to the body, and all natural waters have them in them in varying degrees. And so you can do things to water, for example, like putting sea minerals into water and vortexing it in magnetic fields and scalar fields, and it will bring these monoatomic elements out and become bioavailable, and then the waters become extremely healing. And so I'm always looking at new waters out in the world and water purification systems that will do these things to create not just non-toxic water, but waters that are actually very regenerative and healing. And so right now, for example, last couple of days, I've been experimenting with a water called nanoxide that has colloidal silver and true colloidal silver dissolved into it with massive amounts of oxygen. And I've never seen anything like it. I've been playing with silver waters and colloidal silver and ionic silver waters for decades, and I've not been terribly impressed with them because typically the ones on the market are not truly colloids and they're not even good ionic solutions. But at any rate, this nanoxide stuff is absolutely amazing. They've done a lot of clinical trials showing that this stuff cures cancer and all kinds of stuff. And so I'm experimenting with that right now to test and see if what they're saying is true about it. And it seems to be, because I took a small dose of it and it kicked my butt. It really, it gave me such a cleanse reaction. I was tired for a couple of days. And so, and then there's another one called liquid manna that I'm experimenting with as well. And they've got just unbelievable stories about that water as well, healing all kinds of diseases. And the man who invented it, supposedly his wife was blind in one eye and her eye had atrophied for years, and it was just completely welded over and not even really an eye anymore. And just by putting this water into her eye, after several months, her eye returned to normal. She was able to see normally again. And that sounds like voodoo until you understand monoatomic elements and the superconductivity that they bring into the picture. And so that's one of the things that's very key and important about these monoatomic ormus elements, is that they are superconductors in the right forms. And that is one of the things that makes them able to actually alter matter and alter energy in very fundamental ways and regenerate tissues and regenerate cells. So water is a very complex subject, and usually when I do talks about water, I can spend a few hours talking about it. But in a practical sense, what kinds of water do we want to be drinking? You want water that's been through the full hydrological cycle of the earth and has come back down to the ground from rain and washed through soil, where bacteria in the soil have created angstrom-sized mineral particles, and these monoatomic mineral particles, angstrom-sized particles, are just a few atoms bundled together, and they can feed cells. And in the soil, bacteria will eat rocks and create those small particle sizes, and then rainwater will wash those down into the aquifers. And because the monoatomics are anti-gravitational, they will literally levitate the water back up to the surface through these aquifers. And so when it comes up at spring heads, those waters are very high in these monoatomics. So spring water is one of the best waters you can drink. If you're going to be drinking well water, then obviously you need to have it tested to make sure that it doesn't have any toxic elements in it. But well water is pretty good. It's immature water, but you can vortex it in magnetic fields and scalar fields and bring the ormus elements out and make them bioavailable. I know also there are a lot of people who are interested in alkalized water, ionized water, and depending on your budget and what you have available to you, that's an option that's not ideal, but it's better than other options like drinking tap water or such. And so that's what I do, is I put together these solutions. I find these solutions for health, including water, and present them to the public. There's also a really amazing water purification system on the market now in the United States called the Miracule system, which is Miracule. Their website is miraculewater.com, and they're the first and only people that I know of who have created a water purification system that you can put on your sink, and it will clean the worst water, the crappiest city municipal water, and turn it into living water with these bioavailable Ormus elements in it. And they can't make any claims about it, but I have seen a lot of people, I've seen testimonials from people that have healed disease and all kinds of things just by drinking this water. So water is a very, very powerful substance, and we can do things with it to make it very healing beyond just hydrating the body.
It's also, of course, having huge effects in the world of agriculture. These new water technologies seem to be leading to farmers only having to use half the water they were previously using, and not using a fraction of the chemicals, if any, compared to what they were using in the past.
Exactly. When you structure water these ways, one of the things that you do is, if you're doing it properly, is you flatten the bond angle of the water, of the H2O, and the molecules become smaller, and therefore they're more hydrating to cells, whether they be human cells or plant cells. And so they transport nutrients better. So when you feed plants these waters, they can get the nutrients into their cells much more easily and get waste out of their cells too. So yeah, there's a lot of amazing things going on with structured water. There's a man named Dan Winter who has something called the imploder that works really well for agriculture and for drinking and showering. That vortexes the water right out of the tap, and brilliant technology. There's a lot of cool stuff like that coming out.
And there's a video of you on YouTube showing people how to put magnets around their liquidizer or blender to get powerful water for free at home. Is that right?
Right. One of the things that I've been doing for years is putting these. I make these little blocks of organite, which is a material that puts out.
We seem to have lost you in midstream. We seem to have lost Ken at the moment. We'll try to get him back shortly. I'm not quite sure how long that's going to take. So I'll tell you one particularly interesting thing that's occurred this week, or at least that I've discovered, is that they've been doing research on people who died in motorcycle accidents. And it turns out people who die in motorcycle accidents have 5 times the expected likelihood of a certain parasite called Toxoplasma gondii. And I'm just told that we can go back to Ken Rohla now. Hi, Ken. We lost you briefly.
I don't know. I guess internet connection between here and the UK. So anyway, these little blocks, I strap them to my blender, and I did a lot of experiments vortexing water in these magnetic and scalar fields that these blocks create. And then I would feed it to plants and animals and people and microbes, actually, fermented foods and things, and just got astronomical growth and high nutrient levels. And so I've been teaching people how to do that themselves, and we'll be coming out with those on our website in the next few weeks, where people can actually buy these kits and strap them onto their blender and make monoatomic elements in their blenders at home.
And one of the other ways that I know that you recommend making monoatomic elements is using fermentation and superfoods and so on. Perhaps you could elaborate on the best ways to do that, because I think this is a brilliant way to make your own natural medicines at home in abundance.
Absolutely. It's the best way to make your own. And that's why, my company is an empowerment company. I teach people how to do things themselves to the degree that they want to. And fermentation is one of the best ways to make these monoatomic elements, because they occur in a natural state as opposed to some of these unnatural states that people are making them in with alchemy. So either by photosynthesis or by fermentation, you can make these monoatomic elements. And with fermentation, basically, one of the ways that you can do it is by taking high ormus rock powders like azomite or Jersey green sand, or there's a whole slew of them. There's a wonderful book called The Enlivened Rock Powders by Harvey Lisle, Lisle. You get that book, that'll tell you everything you want to know about rock powders. But you can get rock powders, you can get ocean water, you can get sea mineral concentrates. There's one called Concentrace, and others. And you can feed them, and also you can take lots of other foods and herbs. You can take mushrooms or herbs or various types of supplements. You can even take supplements or superfoods that are not particularly bioavailable, and you can feed them to a culture that called effective microorganisms. And basically you mix a few gallons of water with some molasses and this culture, and you can throw in all these other ingredients and create a massively antioxidant, probiotic, vitamin mineral brew with lots of ormus in it. And then if you do...
Ken, if I can interrupt for a second, if you'd just
Sure.
like to turn your camera off and on again, we'll probably get you back because we've lost the live feed of the camera.
Okay.
Yes, you're back. Thank you. Perfect.
Okay.
Sorry, carry on.
So basically you can make these ferments that will have these ormus elements and completely bioavailable vitamins, minerals, probiotics, enzymes, antioxidants, and you can custom make them to your own needs. You know, it's like if you want to get rid of wrinkles or bald head, you can use herbs that are known to help those conditions and ferment them and create your own brews. If you want to have something to support healing cancer or some disease, you can put herbs and supplements into your brew that are powerful for that.
But would you like to make a few suggestions in each case?
Well, one of my favorites is turmeric. Turmeric root is a very powerful antioxidant, and you can take fresh turmeric root and blend it, or you can take organic turmeric root powder and put it into a brew, and that's a really good cancer support herb. And I've seen quite a few people actually just with that, doing massive doses of that, heal themselves of cancer. There are, any kind of chlorophyll, anything deep in chlorophyll. So wheatgrass juice, chlorella, blue-green algae, greens of any kind, parsley, cilantro, all of those, you can blend them. And also you can vortex them. If you have one of these magnetic blender kits, you can vortex them in these magnetic fields before you ferment them, and the ferments will eat them even more. It will energize the microbes and make them metabolize them even better. What I normally do, and what I tell people to do to make it easy on them, rather than trying to figure out like what herbs to use, I recommend going to herb companies that sell herbal extracts or other medicinal herbs and look at their blends for different types of issues and just get those herbs, particularly if you can get them fresh or dried, organic, and just take those and put them into a brew. And of course, some herbs you have to be careful with. So, make sure that you're, understanding what herbs you're working with. But typically, most herbs are foods, and so you can not overdo them. But when you deal with mushrooms like reishi and maitake and turkey tail and others, they're very powerful, but they can also interfere with a culture. So normally with those, I'll tell people to cook them, boil them, and then put them into ferments after they've cooled down. Mineral powders, like I said, are really good. Sea minerals are really good to put in there. There's a product in the United States called Concentrace that is a seawater concentrate from the Great Salt Lake in Utah. And so you can just throw those into a brew and let it sit for about 3 months. Usually it takes a while, but then you've got gallons and gallons. I mean, you can make 5 gallons of the most incredible brew and save yourself tons of money and have something better than what you can buy in the store.
Well, exactly. I think that's very important because people have so little money these days, a lot of people, that knowing that they don't have to spend £25 a month on a bottle of probiotics, and they could make 100 times the potency of stuff at home for nothing virtually. So what other ingredients do you like? I've heard you talk about ashwagandha, for instance, the Chinese herb.
Yeah, and ashwagandha is really good for pulling out radiation damage from the body, which is a big concern these days, of course, with Fukushima and Chernobyl and all these accidents. Gosh, zeolites also, that's a mineral that is really, really good at pulling out toxins and heavy metals, and any type of thyroid herb. Um, uh, oh gosh, there's so many. I've got a gigantic box full, but what I do, like I say, is I go and look at for different formulas what I want to custom make, and I buy those herbs in powder form or in fresh form, blend them up and ferment them. So that's really the way to do it, is decide what it is you want to do. For example, we have a radiation herbal extract on our website. You can look at the ingredients of that and buy those herbs, ferment them yourself, save yourself some money.
But one of the thyroid herbs that I haven't tried using myself, but people have had good results with, is one of the Ayurvedic ones, Google. Not the Google, the search engine, but Guggel, sometimes called Google Sterone. A number of people have told me that they've tried it just themselves and had a lot of success with that. Have you tried that one, or what
I
other
have
ones?
not. There's so many, there's Chinese medicine herbs, there's Ayurvedic herbs, there's so many different herbs that work. It's really, kind of mind-boggling which ones to choose. In my workshops and in this, we're going to actually be coming out with a kit to make your own supplements. And in that kit, it will list very specific herbs that you can use and where to get them. But there's so many, particularly just in Ayurveda alone, there's so many good herbs.
Yes, clearly. Here in the European Union, whereas we used to have herbalists in every high street, often Chinese herbalists, now they've all gone home because the EU has banned a lot of the herbs that they used to use and medicalized it. So now we have medical herbalists who are medically trained, but they're trying to sort of cut our access to herbs in every way. Obviously, it's a rival to their pharmaceutical profits, of course. But luckily, most of the herbs are available from a culinary point of view, and that's clearly the route that we have to advise people to go. But our ancestors kept all our families alive with herbs and knowledge of nutrition and plants way before the modern takeover of medicine occurred.
Exactly. Yeah, the same thing's happening in the United States. It's becoming increasingly difficult to obtain natural foods and natural supplements. And of course, now in the United States, about 80% of the supplement companies are owned by pharmaceutical companies. So, Americans are really being hoodwinked on the natural supplements.
Well, I think here as well. A few questions are coming in online, and one of them is your take on what to do about fluoride, because, again, the EU has mandated that all the EU should be fluoridated, and of course nobody wants that at all. It doesn't take much research to find out the dangers of fluoride. What would you advise, particularly for those on a low budget, as to how to get that fluoride out?
Well, fluoride filtration is very conventional. It's not hard to get out. There is a filter media called Illumina that, and there's two others, KDF 55 and 85, that will pull fluoride out very easily. So getting fluoride out of the water is not a big deal. It's just a matter of buying a water filter designed to do that. And of course, the problem is truly that water purification, particularly if you're trying to purify the junk coming out of your tap, is an expensive proposition. Whole house filters are fine if you get a good quality one for bathing and doing laundry, but drinking water, you've absolutely got to have water that's not just chemically clean, but also homeopathically structured so it's not toxic, and ideally also has bioavailable minerals and these monoatomic minerals. Specifically with whole house water purification, there are several media that are typically found in a good whole house filter. Of course, carbon is a major one, and in particular there's something called centaur carbon that's a better type of carbon. So if you're looking for something with carbon filtration, I would ask if there's centaur carbon in it. Then you've got KDF 55 and KDF 85, which take out a lot of heavy metals and other VOCs. You've got alumina for fluoride and other things. There's also, you can actually put zeolites in a water filter. Those work extremely well for pulling out a lot of toxins and heavy metals and free radicals. And then you can actually put minerals into the water filter that will improve the homeopathy, like garnet. Garnet used to be used quite a lot in water filters, and these days you don't see it much. But those are some of the media that you should look for in a whole house water filter. And then if I was going to be drinking water out of the tap, I would absolutely have a Miracle water system. And they're not cheap. You're talking about maybe $1,600, I think, for one of those, which in light of what it does is not a bad price. But if you don't have the money, then you don't have the money. In that case, if you don't have those kinds of funds, then what I do is buy bottled spring water, and then I will structure it with ceramics. There's something called K-type ceramic pipes from a company called Terraganix here in the U.S., and that's Teraganix. And they also have S-type ceramics for pulling chemical pollutants out. So I will take spring water and I will ionize it, and then I will put it into a container with those ceramics, and they will pull any toxins out that may remain and structure the water homeopathically. And I'll set the pH of the water up to about 9.5 for normal drinking. And I might bring it up to 11 if I'm doing a cleanse. But that's what I do, and I have done when I didn't have the money to buy a more expensive water system.
So quite a few people have bought water distillers to enable them to make colloidal silver. And I'm aware that some people are using distilled water as a purification for a month or something like that. And I've heard getting really spectacular results. But I don't think one would probably want to do that for more than a month at a time. For those who have a distiller and they're starting that way, what would you recommend they then did to their water to get it right? What would be the most sensible thing?
Okay, well, it's important to understand that there's a lot of controversy about distilled water, and some people say it leaches minerals out of the body, and some people say it doesn't. In my experience and in testing people, yes.
Right, we're back on again.
Okay.
I've had a couple of questions being asked about water. I've got a question here. Can you possibly ask Ken what the white crystalline formation that builds up in a kettle from boiling natural Malvern spring water is, and will our bodies process it naturally?
Okay, that's a very good question. That also ties in with what I was saying about distilled water. With distilled water, you don't want to just throw inorganic minerals into the water and drink it, because the body's not going to metabolize it. It's just like that calcification that shows up in tea kettles and on pots when you're boiling water. What that is, those are deposits of inorganic minerals that are coming out of the water in the distillation process. And those minerals, most of those minerals cannot be metabolized by the body. I had this question for many, many years, and I asked all kinds of experts, and I could never get a good answer. And it wasn't until I asked a man named Victoras Kovinskis, and he gave me the answer, and it made sense. And I found it to be true, is that I was asking, for example, can the body metabolize rock salt? And the answer is that some of these inorganic minerals can be broken down in the body if you have enough probiotic and enzyme activity in the body. Now, typically, if you're eating a diet that consists mostly of cooked food, you're going to be depleted of both of those. And so you're not going to be metabolizing very much of whatever inorganic minerals you ingest. But even in good cases, let's say you're 100% raw vegan lifestyle, you still can only consume a certain amount of inorganic minerals before the body becomes overwhelmed and cannot metabolize them all. And then they wind up getting stuck in the body as calcification, and that's what winds up causing things like arthritis and bone spurs, well, not bone spurs, but bone nodules and calcium and mineral deposits throughout the body, kidney stones, gallstones, liver stones, those kinds of things. So, so you don't want too much. And how much is too much? From everything that I know, I would say you want to be drinking water that has total dissolved solids of 100 parts per million or less, ideally below 50. And of course, consume a diet high in natural enzymes and probiotics, and if you need to, supplement with those so that these minerals can be metabolized by the body.
And there are probably viewers asking what those naturally occurring enzymes are, and perhaps you might like to run through which foods the enzymes occur in. I mean, obviously people particularly need to know more about lipase and its fat digesting elements.
Right. The foods that contain enzymes are any uncooked plant food, any raw living plant food. So that means typically a raw vegan diet, at least 80%. Raw meat is also high in enzymes, but most people aren't going to want to eat raw meat. And so, typically for people who are eating the standard American or British diet, you're going to need to transition to a healthier diet. And that means a diet which really is kind of commonsensically very high in fresh fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, natural living waters. And then about 20% of your diet can be cooked food. It can be animal products. It can be meat. And so you don't have to eat raw meat. And then if you're still not getting enough enzymes through your live food, you can supplement with enzyme supplements and probiotics. When I'm looking for enzymes and probiotics, what I'm looking for with enzymes is the widest variety of enzymes in the product with the highest activity units. And so we sell enzymes that I go through and find that have these higher counts. And then same thing with probiotics. You're looking for the widest variety, typically, of organisms, and then the highest counts of them. And so that's what you're looking for with to get these enzymes and probiotics into your diet. But food has always got to be the foundation.
And as far as supplementing is concerned, what would you recommend for the average person who maybe isn't a health nut, so to speak, but just really wants to improve things and make a difference? What do you think are the basics? The top 10 that you'd recommend?
Well, for sure, the top number one is detoxification, because a lot of people won't change their diet and lifestyle because they have food addictions, they have emotional connections to food. And what makes that much, much easier to change is simply by getting on detoxification programs and doing physical cleansing. And what happens is you will flush chemicals out of your body that will make you crave certain foods. And in particular, sugars, which is a big one. You wind up developing a body of pathogens in the body that will secrete chemicals to make you crave sugars to feed them. And so just by killing them off, that will go a long way towards stopping cravings, particularly for sugar. So in reality, working with people, I've just found that putting people on detox programs of about 6 weeks, a good comprehensive program about 2 to 3 times a year, and doing that, while you're working and stuff. Then when you get done with that, you will naturally gravitate toward healthier foods, and you will lose cravings for foods. And you will also, foods that you loved or craved in the past that weren't particularly good for you, when you eat them again, they just won't taste that good. And so you kind of just naturally lose your taste for these foods that aren't good for you, and you gravitate toward healthier ones. And then you can transition your diet, and it just becomes much easier doing it that way. So detoxification is number one. Another thing also is getting nutrients into the body in a form that the body can metabolize, because typically most people's digestive tracts are very clogged up, calcification, mucoid plaque. They don't metabolize nutrients well. They don't eliminate waste well. And so you've got to do cleansing to clear that out, to improve elimination, but you've also got to improve assimilation. And one of the ways that you do that is by working on the endocrine glands, and especially the thyroid, by working and healing them with herbs and herbal extracts and foods. Then your metabolization will greatly improve, and then you'll get more nutrients in, and then you will have more strength and energy. Your immune system will be stronger, and it will be much easier to transition to a healthier diet. You'll just naturally want to, rather than denying yourself the foods that you really want.
It's interesting you say that, because I went on a short fast a few years back, the first time I'd ever done it, and it was very easy because I'd been given fresh coconuts to eat, and I found that actually I could survive on nothing but fresh coconuts, and that was absolutely fine. And when I did finally come back home and went for the first time into a supermarket, actually really, really hungry, I found that all the things I previously wanted, I just wasn't interested. The only things that took me were the vegetables, but even they didn't look that great. And then luckily there was a real health food shop that was selling real organic vegetables that really were alive. And whereas 2 weeks prior I would have just looked at them, you had nice vegetables, and walked past, suddenly they leapt out at me as the only food in the shop that looked right to have. And so it seems that it doesn't take that long to reset the brain.
Yeah, fasting is a great way of resetting quickly too, because it will stop your artificial hunger that comes from habitual consumption or overconsumption of foods, and also eating processed foods with chemicals that will make you addicted to them. So simply by fasting, it's a really quick way of flushing things out. And people think that fasting means starving, and that's not the case. You can do juice fasting or juice feasts, where you can eat all you want of juice, or even smoothies, if you want to go that route for a while, and that will keep you alkaline, and it will detoxify you very quickly, and it will reset the hunger mechanism very quickly. So I'll have people do, and I do this, a 5-day juice feast or juice fast, and in 5 days, it's exactly what you described. My hunger's reset, and I don't want to eat the junk that I was wanting before. Although, junk in my terms is relative, because what I consider junk, most people would consider health food.
So that was the top two. What other regimes would you recommend, or supplements that you think everybody should really be taking?
Well, because of all of the nuclear fallout that we've got coming down on our food supply, it's getting into our water. We really have to detoxify on a daily basis. And we also need to be working on our thyroid on a daily basis. So typically what I take on a daily basis, always, I take blue-green algae from Klamath Lake in the United States and Oregon. Here you can get it frozen, and it's very powerful. In the UK, you can get it in dried powders. Chlorella I take every day. I take a green superfood mixture of a bunch of different algae and low temperature dehydrated, enzymatically alive greens. I will take zeolites every day, which is very good for pulling radiation or radioactive particles out of the body. I will take a thyroid formula every day, an herbal blend. It's an extract from God's herbs here in the United States. I will take a radiation formula from God's herbs every day. There are, for example, brown seaweed extract. That's another one. It's phenomenal for healing the thyroid and protecting against nuclear radiation and also electromagnetic radiation. I make a whole cocktail of stuff. I take about a quart of water, and I throw in all of those ingredients. I also will take probiotics, enzymes. Oh gosh, what else? There are a whole slew of things. If I eat cooked food, then before I go to bed, I will take a colon cleanse called oxy powder, and that will help flush out the cooked food so that it doesn't become plaque in the GI tract. Um, I'm given a lot of supplements by friends and sometimes salespeople, and so I've got piles of stuff that I sometimes will take, particularly if I'm cleansing. But usually herbal extracts, like I just mentioned, on a day-to-day basis, and then some nutrients like vitamin and mineral supplements. And like I say, I make my own brew. I make my own fermented brew. So that has just a huge array of herbs and rock powders and wheatgrass and algae and a whole slew of stuff. So I'll take that every day. But the main things, the most important things are probiotics, enzymes, vitamins, and minerals, because those four are all needed together to be metabolized. They need to be in a food form, so not these synthetic extracted forms that most nutraceutical companies sell on the market, but food-based. So for example, I take a vitamin C powder that is made completely out of rose hips and citrus and food. So those are some of the things that I take. I call it a detox tonic, a nutrient detox tonic. So it's, on the one hand, it's detoxifying, but it's also very nutritious. And it's kind of like a nutritional insurance policy to make up for the lack of nutrients in our food, because even organic food now is sadly lacking in nutrients. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can test it in your own kitchen by getting a device called a Brix meter, BRIX, also known as a refractometer. And you can take a little bit of plant juice. It looks like a little telescope with a lens, and you can squeeze the plant juice onto the lens and then look through the device, and it will give you a reading. And with that, you can tell the Brix reading of your food in your kitchen, and you can compare that to a chart, a Brix reading chart of what it should be. And that'll give you an idea of how your own produce stacks up to what it should be.
And it's very shocking as well, the results that people see. It is shocking,
and the real solution, too, is to grow your own food. And it doesn't mean that you've got to have a big plot of land and grow a bunch of stuff. It can be as simple as sprouting to supplement your diet in some trays next to a window. You know, I mean, like in my house, we grow about 6 trays of sprouts per week, and it creates massive amounts of food, very dense nutrition, very inexpensively. I mean, just pennies. Each tray probably costs $1.50 and creates pounds of food. And we can spray these ocean mineral concentrates on the sprouts, and they will absorb it. And then they are extremely nutrient dense, and they're very high in these monoatomic minerals. There's a product called Sea Crop, SEA Crop. In the United States. You can get it from California. Their website is sea-crop.com, and it's an inexpensive Ormus seawater extract that you can foliar feed your sprouts or your plants, and it will radically jack up the nutrient levels. So you can do simple things within your own house or apartment to supplement your diet without spending a lot of money on supplements. And those are the kinds of things that I teach in my workshops, is exactly how to do that.
Yes, it's exactly the same things that I teach. Sprouting, I think, is one of the most wonderful things, to have fresh salads any time of year. Even if somebody's living on the 55th floor of a tower block, they can still have a fresh salad all the time. Marvelous way to eat.
Yeah, and once you get used to eating that kind of food, then the stuff in the stores is no longer acceptable. It's like when you get used to eating real food with flavor and nutrients, then it's obvious how devoid of nutrients the junk in the stores is.
Well, the food's all become seedless. You know, they've taken the seeds out of absolutely everything. When I was young, cucumbers had seeds, bananas had seeds, everything had seeds, you could plant them. So now we're being sold sterile foods, which are good for nobody, really.
Right.
The figures I've seen recently on English apples is that the average English apple is sprayed with 43 different chemicals, and all of those are designed, obviously, not to wash off in the rain, and that they have a 20th of the mineral content on average that they did just 30 years ago. Which is pretty shocking. And 30 years ago, they were massively depleted. And unfortunately,
that's it.
a lot of the people who are planting fruit trees, say in the garden, unfortunately are planting the new varieties when they should be seeking out the old varieties and cultivating them because they've got the goodness still built in.
Exactly. The heirlooms, of course, from an earlier time, they do have more nutrients if you feed them properly and less sugars. But there's a really cool solution too. There are actually some plant foods that you can feed GMO and hybrid plants that will revert their DNA back to the original heirlooms. And it's pretty mind-blowing. But a few years ago, I saw this. I was attending an Ormus conference, and there was a company there that had a product called Garden Shot, S-H-O-T. You can go to gardenshot.com and you can see this. And it's basically a very high Ormus plant food that these people created. And they showed me pictures of where they fed it to GMO and hybrid crops, and it was mind-boggling. It would revert the plants back to the original heirlooms. And they're not the only ones doing it. There's another company online that actually created a product that will do that, and they got into trouble in the United States and had to go into hiding, and so they don't market it that way anymore. But if you go to restandrepair.com, there is a product called Microbe Blast, and you can feed that to your plants, and it will heal the DNA and revert it back. So there's always a solution to these problems. When you understand how consciousness creates reality, the polarities of energy that create these problems, the opposite polarities always simultaneously create the solutions. So I always encourage people, when they see a problem or they're concerned about an issue, just start looking for the solution and do some Googling, and ultimately you will find it. You'll attract it and find it.
Well, I'm recommending to everybody who asks me about their health problem to go onto Google and just put on the name of their health problem with the words natural and cure. And right now, the wonderful freedom of it that we actually still have, the answers to every disease are on the front page of Google. Easy to find. It's amazing.
Exactly. It's mind-blowing to me that more people don't get that. You know, it's like people will call me and pay me all kinds of money to tell them what they can find on Google.
Yes.
You know, it's like, it's the greatest oracle there is. When, you know, thousands of years ago, people would travel thousands of miles and go through all kinds of hardship and a threat to their life to find out one little nugget of information that you can pull up in 2 seconds on Google. It's just amazing. And so we have to get in the habit of doing that, of looking for those solutions. Most people don't even know to pose the question. And that's part of the mind control that is so prevalent on our planet, is people have been programmed to not even think that there is such a solution in existence. But in fact, there are solutions for everything somewhere on this planet if you just seek them out.
There are indeed solutions to everything, every single problem. And I know that you've looked at some of the solutions, for instance, to free energy and some of the more interesting topics. Is that something you care to talk about?
Yeah, I actually, a couple weeks ago, I was at a conference in Colorado called the Global Breakthrough Energy Movement. And I was actually really, really shocked to see that they actually had some free energy technology on display there. Because back in the early 90s, I worked with a man named Ewell Brown who developed water fuel technology. And ultimately, he was killed over it. And a lot of other people that I've known who worked with free energy have been killed. So it is a dangerous field to be in. But just so people understand, when I worked with Ewell Brown, I witnessed with a team of engineers and physicists and inventors this water fuel being used to neutralize radioactive materials. And the way that it worked is Brown had figured out a way to create a fourth phase of water, which was a gas, but it was not steam. And it had a lot of really weird properties. And when you would burn it, it would burn with a blue flame, but it would not explode. It would implode back into water. And for anybody that may have studied Victor Schauberger's work, the only kind of energy production that is ever going to work on this planet long term that's non-toxic is going to have to be implosive force technology. So this gas was implosive force, and you could use it to run engines with. If you mixed it with conventional fuels like gasoline, it would make it run much, much more efficiently and require less gasoline. Or you could use it by itself and run an engine on a vacuum because it would implode. But it also had a lot of really weird quantum properties. So when you took the flame from it and used it to burn things, it would burn things at an atomic and subatomic level. So they created a welder with it that could weld anything to anything because it was rearranging matter at the subatomic and atomic levels. It was literally doing alchemy on the material. So you could weld plastic to metal or wood to glass or anything to anything very quickly and very easily. It would supplement tungsten on contact just instantly. And yet if you ran your hand through it, through the flame, it felt cool. And you can actually go on YouTube if you search on Brown's gas, and you can see these water welders working. And so, I witnessed that in the early 90s, but the technology to neutralize radioactivity has been around since the 70s. There was a professor emeritus in physics at Arizona State University here in the States named Dr. Radha, it's R-A-D-H-A, Roy, R-O-Y. And you can go on YouTube and search and find the Roy process, and you can see him talking about it before he died. And he was a very well-credentialed scientist who had developed a technology that was inexpensive in '75 for neutralizing radioactivity. So, all this nonsense about nuclear power and radioactivity, first of all, the nature of it is what they're describing is not true and not correct. But the ability to neutralize it has been around for many decades, and there are multiple ways of doing it. But the problem is that those technologies for neutralizing radioactivity, they're also free energy technologies. They imply free energy production because those same technologies can be used to produce vast amounts of energy for free or inexpensively. And so in my experience working with people who've developed free energy technologies, most of them, a lot of them are dead now. And the ones that are still around, some of them have been threatened and poisoned. I know I've been threatened, and I haven't even developed free energy. So it can be a dangerous field to be in. But there are multiple technologies. And on my Facebook page, I post it all the time, new free energy technologies from very reputable people.
Of course, while they killed Yul Brown, Brown's gas is available in kits, and the instructions are on the internet as to how to make them. I know several people who are running Brown's gas on their car. Doesn't seem a terribly expensive thing to fit a Brown's gas device, does it?
Right. Yeah. In my experience, these technologies are not complicated. The physics and science behind them is, but the actual making of them isn't. And so the only way that they're going to get out is if they're given away for free. And some scientists are starting to understand that. There is an Iranian physicist living in Belgium named Kesh, who has come out with free energy technology that has all kinds of amazing applications. And he's realized that, so he has given the information away how to create the technology. And of course, he's being heavily attacked and suppressed. But there are very good, honest people that realize that you're not going to be able to patent it and make $1 billion. You're going to have to give it away in order to get it out. And so it's just a matter of time before that happens. As Patrick Flanagan said, it was Thomas Bearden, who was a brilliant physicist. He said, there's got to be enough inventors coming out where they can't all be killed. And that's exactly what's happening.
Exactly right. And it's about time too. And I noticed that last time I looked, water welders are easily available, and they're not very expensive either. So a lot of this simple technology really is that simple and easy to build.
Very true. As a matter of fact, Yul Brown got his ideas for this water fuel technology from a man named William Rhodes, who developed water fuel welders back in the early 60s. So William Rhodes is really kind of the father of it here in the United States, and several people took his ideas and used it to power vehicles and stuff. I'm guessing that Rhodes knew that he would have problems if he tried to develop it as a fuel source. So he just kept it as a water welder. And that company, the names have changed, but you can still buy that welder made in Arizona today.
Yes, yes, indeed. Well, it is very good that there is so much good news around, and I think we're going to see over the next year that these new water products are going to make an enormous difference in people's lives, as they're already beginning to, clearly. And you mentioned the Miracule system, which while I haven't tried that one yet, it does sound exceptionally promising. And I asked them, if you bought a system, well, will it produce enough water that you could produce enough for yourself and several other people? And I can't remember how many gallons it produces a day, but it was enough that one machine could support several families.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure the Miracle system can do that. It's not like reverse osmosis, so it produces a lot of water in a day's time. And just to give you an idea of how sophisticated that technology is, the man that invented it, Ron Talmadge, he was actually killed because he also developed free energy technology, and he was working on that. So it's not just the usual filtration. I thought I was going to have to invent that machine myself. I didn't, before I found out it was on the market, I knew I needed to do something for my own water. And so I knew that the way to do that is to vortex water through magnetic fields and scalar fields along with filtering it. And lo and behold, there's a company that already has done that. And so it's a brilliant, brilliant piece of technology.
And some of the big companies are also coming out with the answers. Ciba-Geigy, the drugs company, came out with a frequency. They patented the idea, they called it the Ciba-Geigy effect, to also revert GM seeds back to normal. And Lockheed Martin, the weapons manufacturer in America, they've recently announced a microfilter for filtering seawater and making it into pure drinking water, which is, I think, something like one cell wall thick, this filter, so amazingly cheap. Breakthroughs are right there, as you say. All you got to do is look for the solution, and you're almost falling over them. We're going to have to wind up very shortly. I wanted very briefly for you to talk to me for just a couple of minutes about smart meters, because I know they're rolling them out now in England, and they've been rolling them out for a while in America. Are they as dangerous as everybody believes they are? They seem incredibly dangerous things, something you wouldn't want in your house.
Yeah, I believe so. Some people are more sensitive than others to them, but it's like strapping about 100 cell phones on the side of your house. I'm an electrical engineer by training, and so I've actually gotten some smart meters and dissected them, so I know what's in them. And also, I have gone out and measured EMF coming off of these devices. And of course, the power companies will say that, that they don't put up much power, and that they only run every 4 to 6 hours and only for a few seconds, because that's what all of the employees are being told. But in truth, you can take an EMF meter to one of these smart meters and measure that every 30 seconds or so they're transmitting, and they're doing it all day long. And then, of course, if you're in a densely populated area and you're not, the way these things work is, and for people that aren't familiar with smart meters, what they are power meters that have a radio transmitter. So that actually it's a microwave transmitter, it's a cellular transmitter using a proprietary cellular system. It doesn't use cell phone towers. They use their own proprietary cellular system. And they put these receivers or transceivers on telephone poles every every quarter mile or so here in the United States. And the local buildings with smart meters transmit to the tower, and then the tower transmits it to the company headquarters. And it relays your power usage data to them, but it also has a computer built into the meter so that it can analyze your power, and it can tell what types of devices you're using and when they're using them. And so it can gather great amounts of detail on what kinds of appliances you use, when you're using them, when you're home, when you're not home, what your patterns are. There were even a couple of professors at the University of North Carolina in the U.S. that showed that you could even determine what you were watching on television through analyzing the power data that was collected. That's mind-blowing to me. So they're an invasion of privacy on the one hand, They're also very hackable on the otother hand because they use HTTP protocol, which is Internet Protocol, for transmitting the data, which is very insecure and very hackable. And in fact, security companies have been hacking them and showing how hackable they are. And then on top of that, they're transmitting with all of this microwave radiation on the side of your house. And if you're living in an apartment complex where you've got a lot of these meters in a localized area, you can be getting massive doses of electromagnetic radiation. Now, the power companies will quote and say that, oh, well, there are no studies that have been done to show that smart meters are damaging to people. And so far, that may be true. But there are plenty of studies showing that that type of electromagnetic radiation from other devices is very damaging. And there are no studies showing that they're not damaging. And so the reality is a lot of people are having problems with them and getting health problems from them. The question is, what can you do about them? Well, ideally, the best thing to do is never get one in the first place. So the best thing to do is be proactive and talk to your power company about what your options are for refusing a smart meter. And of course, they're going to try and tell you that you've got to take one. But in reality, there's no law yet in the United States and probably in the UK that mandates that you have to take one, even though some people may make you think that. Also, the power companies in general, their positions here right now, for the most part, are in some cases, particularly if you force their hand publicly, they may try to shut your power off. But in many cases, and in most cases here, you can still adamantly request to have a digital non-transmitting meter installed or even a mechanical meter installed, and they will do that, although they will charge you a little extra money per month. So the best solution is to keep it off your house or get it off your house and be adamant about standing up for your rights with your power company. There are plenty of websites showing all of the different arguments and all of the different facts about these. There's a wonderful movie that just came out called Take Back Your Power. I believe their website is takebackyourpower.net. It's like an hour and a half, 2 hour long feature film with all of the information that the power companies don't want you to know about these things. So educate yourself about the hazards and the issues with them. Then talk to your power company and make it clear to them that they are to not put one on if they haven't already, remove if they have. And if in the meantime, if you don't want to take a confrontational approach, you can actually wrap a smart meter in several layers of aluminum, heavy-duty aluminum foil. And then on the inside wall of the meter, you can put about a 3 by 3 foot square of aluminum foil, several layers of it, heavy-duty stuff you buy in a grocery store. And then cut a little slot through the foil where the meter reader can read the meter manually, and that will knock out 98% of the EMF coming off of the meter. Of course, it will require that a meter reader come to your house physically and read it. The power company is not going to be happy about it, so it's really only a temporary solution. But at least, those are the kinds of things you can do in the immediate. I've contacted my power company. Fortunately, I'm in a town that the city actually provides power, and they're not that sophisticated, so we haven't got smart meters yet. But I bolted a welded cage over my meter so that the meter reader can come and read it all day long, but nobody is going to be able to replace that meter without my consent. And just so you know, the power companies own the wires coming to the meter, and they own the meter itself, but they don't own anything else. The box that it's plugged into and everything else, even the conduit, that you own. When you build a building, you pay for all that, and that is yours. So if the power company comes and vandalizes anything, then they're legally liable. All they can do is touch the meter and the wires going to it. And so you can inform them of that in writing. And typically they will inform you of that. Like here in Florida, where we get a lot of hurricanes, every now and then on the bills, they will tell you, you're responsible for everything except for the meter and the wires, because if a hurricane comes and tears up your meter and your electric panel, you've got to replace it, not them. So they know this. But there's a lot you can do to protect yourself.
Right, very good. Thanks for that. And just before we go, there's been one last question that's come up on the screen asking about plastic bottles. There's recently been some publicity that even the hard bottles, which were previously thought to be safe, now the scientists are saying that all the plastic bottles are dangerous. Is there anything else apart from glass to store water in?
Well, I store water in ceramics, opaque ceramics, just because light can affect water. It can affect it in a positive way or a negative way. But when I'm storing it in my kitchen, I'll put it in a ceramic crock. So yeah, I mean, anything you're going to be drinking out of, particularly long term, it should be glass or ceramic. Stainless steel is not ideal because it will discharge ions in the water and affect the water homeopathically. If you study the work of Victor Schauberger, you can learn more about the effects metals have on it. Wood actually is a really good container for storage in some respects, but of course, over time it can mold and rot and that kind of stuff. But porous ceramics are also even better because porous ceramics will allow the water to breathe. Egg-shaped vessels, amphora-shaped vessels are better than square or geometric forms. It has to do with the scalar energy that's zipping through the cosmos. These shapes will help concentrate it in the inside the water. But really, ceramic and glass are the only options. Of course, it's hard to buy water, like bottled water in glass anymore. So what I do if I'm getting water in plastic bottles, I will use the Terraganics S-type ceramic stones along with the K-type to clean up that water.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a great pleasure, and I look forward to speaking with you again. And as it's still the afternoon over there in Florida, I hope you have a very wonderful day.
Well, thank you, Clive. I appreciate it. And you have a good evening.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for all the viewers for watching. Cheerio.